My name is Mary Cirencioni. I'm the head of Propeller US, the lovely group that has brought the Empower Cafe to you here. And I am joined by three incredible women. And today we are going to talk about GLP-1s, right? And how they're shifting consumer behavior, how they're shifting, dare I say it, the brand and business landscape right now, right? And so the premise was, are they shifting? And we all got together and we decided, the shift has happened and it's going to continue to happen. And we're only seeing kind of the surface level of what might be possible just now. So I'm going to briefly ask each of them to introduce themselves, and then we will get straight into it. So, Jane, would you like to go first?
Hi, I'm Jane Wolfson. I'm the president of Captify UK and International. And we are a search intent business, and we take billions of real-time search intent signals every day and create target audiences out of that, and also then measure the impact on search.
Claire?
I'm Claire Robert-Shaw. I'm Global Executive Creative Director at Design Bridge & Partners. We're a global brand and design agency, and we work with brands big and small to make them meaningful and memorable.
And Virginia? Oh.
I'm Virginia Marsh, and I'm with Fluent, and I head out the audience solutions, and we work with data from surveys, and I take the answers from the questions that I administer and turn them into audiences.
Lovely. So we know that we're competing with a lot of street noise. We've got some element of wind behind us, so we're going to do our best to project. So firstly, we were going to kind of paint a better picture for everyone, right? So let's dig into kind of what we're seeing and what we're sensing that tells us that this shift is happening, right, or has happened. So, firstly, what does the data show, right? So what is it telling us about GLP-1 users today? And, what's their age, their gender, their demographics? I think, Virginia, you had some of those stats to drop on us.
Of course. So if you were to look at it holistically, you would say she's a woman between 40 and 60. She's got children at home. She's dealing with healthcare issues. And in some cases, she's paying out of pocket. And if you were doing that, then you are completely missing the target, because you have to look at it by type and you have to look at it by generation, because each generation treats it completely different.
Lovely. Anything to add on that?
Yeah, I think we've been seeing from our own data that I think you're right in terms of the targeting of different people using it for different reasons. Some people are still using it, for targeting type 2 diabetes, but also obviously the weight loss has crept up, and we can see that in search terms. What's interesting is that from what was used to be a clinical brand and known as clinical brands like Wegovy or Ozempic are now more lifestyle brands, and you can see that in the way people are searching, whether that's through LLM search, conversational searches, asking more around, how can I lose weight, and then we're able to kind of look at all of those target signals and realize actually this has become a lifestyle.
Yeah.
GLP-1s have now become lifestyle products. And therefore, that opens up the opportunity for brands.
So that's a really important point, right? So again, what started as a wellness or, medical conversation, medical, option has shifted, right? So as Jane said, it's a lifestyle decision, right? So people are making lifestyle choices around the use of this drug and then, everything that comes next, right? So I think it's really important because, Virginia, you were saying, like, the reality is if you were going to typecast this as a woman of a certain age, that's limiting, right? And that is not the only application here. So what do we know about their consumer mindset besides the fact that they're looking, it's now expanded into that lifestyle realm? Is there anything else about them? I mean, that we've noticed even anecdotally, or some of the brands that you've worked with? Anything else we should pull in?
I'm happy to jump in. So if you don't mind me reading, because I do have some stats, but I think it's really important. When Gen Z looks at it, they're optimizing. When you're looking at millennials, it's more of a transformation. When you're looking at Gen X, it's a relief. And when you're looking at boomers, it's a clinical purpose. And I'll deep dive into any of those, but those are pretty much the different use cases and how they are looking in the market for those drugs.
All right, so that's actually, you made that very snackable for us, Virginia. I appreciate that. So the idea being that, you can actually break down the generational usage in a way that hopefully brands across sectors could kind of put into practice, right? Is there anything, within that kind of breakdown? I think it's fair to say that the priorities are different, right? So maybe we should talk about a little bit about that. I think Claire, you have something to offer around kind of the idea of impulse purchasing or psychology of desire and want.
Yeah, I think I've never heard the term food noise as much. And food noise is a psychological shift that it doesn't actually happen anymore. So in terms of the receptors that are affected by GLP-1s, they are affecting something that is really driving a really high level of impulse purchase and consumption. So if that is switched off, their mindset is completely different. The only one stat I've got compared to you, Virginia, is a McKinsey study revealed 74% of GLP-1 audiences would now prioritize nutrition over taste and convenience. So in terms of the implication, regardless of the motivation of them, but the implication is that they are not shopping in terms of being tempted and desire and impulse, which is such a huge shift, especially for people that work in my industry, because you are appealing to those people and you need to speak to them in a very, very different way.
And
I love that.
important.
Jane. Oh, sorry, Virginia, go ahead.
I was just going to tell, it's important also to think that we say they're spending less and they're consuming less, and that's not really true. They might be spending less, they might be spending better. They might be consuming less, but they're spending better. They are looking for higher quality goods, and they're very intentional about it.
Yeah, and I think also on the food side, we could, in terms of targeting GLP-1 users, it is different in different markets as well. So just to be clear, that the US targeting is
Yes, we have to get into that.
You're able to do that much better than you can from a UK perspective, let's say, because of GDPR rules. But in terms of food, I think you're right, and I think we just saw something in the UK that Morrison's supermarket have just brought out a brand, a snack brand, which is appealing directly to GLP-1 users because it's smaller, less calories, but it's full of protein, and that's made a difference. But what's really interesting as well that we've seen in the data, because when we create our audiences, we can see what other interests they have. And for GLP-1 users, in particular across the UK and US, travel actually comes top before food. It's travel, food, beauty and wellness, and then fitness actually comes further down. We think that's because people now don't need to go to the gym so much because they found a different way of losing weight. However, if you were a fitness brand, then you'd probably want to focus more on muscle. There's the muscle strengthening.
Yeah.
There are, side effects that do impact people that they need to, brands need to be mindful of. But travel and re-entering the travel arena, I mean, that's fantastic news, really, for travel brands as well.
Yeah.
And for people to have that confidence, and that goes back to that lifestyle point. It's about confidence and feeling comfortable doing things that you weren't able to do for a while.
So I think what we've heard is that there's actually a lot of opportunity here for brands, right, across sectors, right? So again, as Claire said, food is the obvious choice. There's also alcohol and spirits, right? So we're seeing, a big boom in, in terms of NA and low sugar and all of that, right? So again, and I think the way these different brands play into those generations, right, and trying to appeal to them, they'll be able to serve them differently. Then there's, of course, beauty, right? There's fitness, I think, as you said, Jane, which I think is great. The initial implications may be that folks are going to the gym less, but actually, I saw a report recently that said that muscle toning is actually becoming more important. So as folks get more education about how to maximize on these medications, they're probably going to maybe course correct. So again, a fitness brand, if they were forward thinking, could probably get ahead of that trend, right? I think, in terms of sectors, I think we said it touches all of these, right? So again, when we go back to the premise of today's talk, it's this idea that the shifting is happening. I don't think any sector is necessarily immune or will be immune. Certainly some are more obvious, the impacts being felt now. Is there anything to be said in terms of maybe in terms of what's next, right? So sectors that should be on the lookout for this, right? And I'm not sure if anybody has anything to offer on that one.
I would definitely say gym is important, especially for the Gen X, for the bone density and the muscle loss, which is around 25% when they're on GLP-1. But I think it's really important too is while you're on GLP-1, unfortunately, you do have a little skin issues. Your skin starts to sag a little bit, start to get a little bit more wrinkles, so a lot of skin care. Unfortunately, another side effect is hair loss. I don't mean to scare y'all, but hair loss is another one. So hair products brands are also going to see an influx. And then again, a lot in protein because as you start losing weight so rapidly, you're starting to lose a lot of the muscle mass.
Okay. And then Jane, go ahead, Claire.
I was just going to say in food as well, I think the natural thing we go to is less. And exactly your example with Morrison's in the UK, they're smaller portions. They almost look like supplements or medicine rather than food. But what we're also seeing with our luxury clients is actually people psychologically and also physically can't eat as much. But if they're going to eat one biscuit, they want it to be the most amazing biscuit you're ever going to have. So brands like Fortnum & Mason, for example, what's really, really important with them is that the traceability of ingredients, the authenticity, the provenance, the storytelling, these audiences don't just want medicine. They also do want to find a different way of consuming and different pleasure. So I think it's dangerous for brands just to think in one binary way that we're going to strip everything back and everyone just wants to almost shop food as if it were fuel.
Now, Jane, you name dropped Morrison's, which again, I'm a New Yorker, so I don't know them.
It's a supermarket.
Supermarket. Okay. So I always think, again, in my space, we hear a lot of criticism around brands that get it wrong. But here's one, here's a retailer that's kind of getting it right, perhaps. Are there any other brands or retailers we should name drop, call out?
I think for that example specifically, they're the first supermarket.
The first one to do it.
Right? So
All
that
right.
doesn't necessarily mean it's the right thing. But
Fair.
But
Good point.
But they're the first to do it. I'm sure we'll see how long it stays on the shelves for, whether it's successful or otherwise. But I think that, in terms of, it's just a market that I think brands perhaps haven't thought about.
Fair.
So
Fair.
it's kind of showing those audiences and saying that they are actually, there are opportunities to target outside of specifically the drugs themselves, but within different categories, which brands may not have thought about before. But it's not exactly the same comparison at all. But there's a lot of menopause products when menopause became less taboo to talk about.
Yes.
There was a lot of products that were targeted to people that were menopausal, and so that created another market. So I don't think we're quite there yet, but that's the direction.
I actually love that you brought that up, Jane, because when we were kind of prepping, we talked about this concept of like the secrecy almost around GLP-1 use and this idea that it's at times perceived as a shortcut or a cheat or, and it's interesting because, again, it's medicine, right? So I don't think that most medicine or any other, I can't think of another medicine that would be kind of perceived
people
that
didn't want
way.
to say they were on HRT. People wouldn't talk about it. And now it's
hormone
fine.
replacement therapy, for those who don't know. So, but I think that's actually an excellent comparison to kind of that menopausal stage for women as well, right? And we always, again, we look for brands and businesses. How can they lead change or demonstrate support, encouragement, that kind of a thing? And when it comes to kind of this taboo nature, I do think increasingly we will see probably this normalization that you saw with menopausal products, that you saw with period products, 8-9 years ago with the launch of Thinx period panties and brands like Cora, where that put design forward, right? And made it something that didn't need to be hidden in a woman's bag. It could be kind of, just tossed in there proudly, right? So again, I think, when will that happen? I don't know. We could probably make some assumptions, but I do think that the more, and tell me if you agree, the more brands play into this space, get comfortable with it, will help.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I do think one brand that is doing it really well is Nestle, Vital Pursuit. So that's a range of frozen foods, specifically GLP-1 range, which is really easily navigable, very proudly showing, all the macros so that you're really, guided through the purchase. But I also think there's a huge opportunity in terms of brand experience to show amazing empathy with this audience, that it's not, a cheat and it's not a secret and it's not embarrassing. And actually, it can be a really empowering, amazing life change for people that have been, trapped in a cycle for many, many years, especially the older demographic that you spoke to. Actually, treating those audiences with dignity and allowing them to feel as though the brands understand them. And you can create, I think, brand experiences and branding and packaging that actually is going to support them and feel liberating and fueling and energizing and actually accompany them more like a cheerleader than a doctor. And I think that is like a really emotive, powerful way that a brand can connect.
Yeah.
I love that. Jane?
If the brands, people don't want to feel shamed into being a GLP-1 user. So if brands are able to address that, as you say, in terms of what it stands for, and actually it's not, we do have to be careful about targeting this group specifically anyway. There'll be a lot of trust issues, brand safety, et cetera, that has to be kind of, overlaid with all of this. But if you are able to, as you say, be a cheerleader, which is a great expression to come together and kind of say you're there as a support and to celebrate your new lifestyle that you are now able to live.
I love that. One of the other things we had talked about is, and forgive me, I know everyone loves to make a comparison to COVID times, but kind of the big question here is, will GLP-1s bring about the biggest shift in consumer behavior since the pandemic? And I think, Jane, you had a kind of a hot take. You want to give it to us, and then we'll go around the room?
Yeah, my take on it is that we're not at critical mass yet with this. It's not a critical mass audience, so I don't think it's as... There is obviously a shift in behaviours and thought processes, but it's the usage is double. It's US versus the UK. So I think that the audience is still relatively small, certainly from a UK perspective.
And then I think, again, I just want to repeat that because that's a really important stat, right? So double the use in the US currently than it is in the UK. A whole lot of global brands out there, and obviously the way that they can appeal or target people is different based on the market. We're not necessarily recommending either way, but it is something to certainly consider as you kind of look deeper into that breakdown that Virginia cited. What about you, Claire? I think you also had an idea around kind of this shift or the, how do I explain, the power of this shift or the potential impact.
Yeah, just even the fact that, I think it's 6% of UK households are using GLP-1s. I think that's massive. Like, that is actually a lot. And I think next year when you have an oral medication, it's not jabs, things become more available. I think actually I believe it will increase a lot more and be more permissible. One thing I'm slightly terrified about is that food is such a thing that people gather around. And it's something that really, is something that people sit around a table, and it's not just to eat. They're talking, they're communicating, they're catching up. And I feel like, especially as a mother, if you don't have that moment around the table, that bit where the kids are not on a screen, where you're asking everyone around their day, I feel like it's not just the physiological, and physical effects for people. It actually could have a massive impact on society. And I think that's really important, that if it's not going to be a ritual around a table and food, what's replacing it? Because otherwise, I think that could be, actually quite a terrifying future.
Yeah, I agree. I do think it has to become more of a social. It has to be just like, if you're not consuming alcohol, but you still want to be out with your friends who are consuming alcohol, you want to be able to have that alcohol look-alike drink and feel like you're part of that social environment. Yeah. It's really important.
Or create new rituals.
Exactly.
And I think that is where brands can get, in there creating new experiences for people that don't feel like, I'm still going to the pub, but I'm not having a drink. Exactly. What else is there? And I feel that is a playground for brands to really innovate.
So, anything to add?
I was just going to say, I did read an article about that, where it was a lady who was on GLP-1s and then didn't want to cook the family meal anymore because they had no interest in eating it herself. But then got all the kids to cook. So they all learned how to cook and stuff.
All right, so that's one of Jane's mic drop moments here is use it as an avenue towards getting the kids to cook. Laundry too, right, Jane?
Yeah, everything.
They should do both. I actually love the idea that you brought up here around the rituals, right? And again, we are talking to brand land and in the business world here. I'm not saying that that brands should try to help communities create new rituals, but they can certainly support that. They can see, pay attention, maybe breakfast. becomes the more important meal for gathering, because dinner just, by the time the end of the day comes around, dinner's just not literally on the table for folks, right? So, keeping your eye out, I think, as a brand and seeing how you can play into it, it certainly sounds powerful. Is there anything here, I know we said, again, market differentiation. Is there anything here, that we should kind of, in terms of a call to action to brands, right, or businesses, is, we know every generation right now places a very high priority around trust and transparency. So, certainly speaking to those elements, but is there anything else, like if you had to, and we'll start with Virginia and kind of move down here, that you would kind of make sure, brands and businesses are considering?
Yeah, and I think it's really important because they are doing a lot of social. They're doing a lot of the AI research, and it's really important. Don't just slap a label on that says GLP-1. Make sure you're reformatting so that you do keep that trust, because they will recognize it, and then you'll just lose that trust from them.
I love that. Claire?
I think for brands, they do need to make that shift from seduction to function. But I think they need to do that in a way that doesn't lose their distinctiveness. They need to be really aware of this kind of sea of sameness, medication, functional food, because I do think brands are powerful. And, the conversation about trust, brands do play a key role in that, which I think is important. And then just to reiterate my previous point, I think it's celebrating that sense of optimism as well. So I think whilst you're catering for that audience, doing it in a way that brings some joy, I think that's what's needed in this category.
I love that. Jane?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the lifestyle point, right?
Absolutely.
It's a lifestyle change for a lot of people. And if you can connect with them in that moment, and then, a new lease of life for a lot of people, frankly. And it is sad about the food, actually, because, it's, as you say, it's such a great connector. But in terms of brands and targeting these people from a lifestyle lens, I think is really important.
Absolutely. So I want to thank everyone here for joining us for the last half hour or so. I certainly want to thank my three panelists. I know I speak on behalf of them when I say please connect with us on LinkedIn. We'll be here for a bit. If you have any further questions, you have any thoughts, any anecdotes, I'm sure we'd love to hear it. But thank you, and thank you all for joining me in the sun.